Here is a disclaimer for this episode. I recorded this about 5 minutes before the Rangers traded Marcus Semien to the New York Mets for Brandon Nimmo. I didn't want to throw away the entirety of this episode, but this episode does not address that at all. So I do not want to hear you in the comments saying, "Hey, Bryce, what about Marcus Semien? What about Brandon Nimmo?" This was recorded before that. So just bear that in mind with what I say in this episode. And now, here's today's show. Barely 2 years after Josh Sborz, Jonah Heim, and Adolis Garcia helped the Rangers win the first championship in franchise history, they're all gone.
You are Locked On Rangers, your daily Texas Rangers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are locked onto the Texas Rangers, the first and best daily Rangers podcast. I'm Bryce Patrick, a cripplingly addicted Texas Rangers fan, covered this team for 12 seasons, including all 7 as the founder and host of this podcast. Thank you so much for making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. If you're not already, you can follow me on Twitter at Bryce Patrick. You can follow the show at Locked On Rangers. Hit subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform and on YouTube, where the best way you can help grow the show is to comment nearly any single thing below. Now, on today's show, we're talking about the Rangers cutting bait, non-tendering Adolis Garcia, Jonah Heim, Josh Sborz, and Jacob Webb, and what they do now and why this is just not a great omen for how this offseason is going to go. But before we get into all of that, today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Now, on Friday afternoon, part of this seemed like the likely end for Adolis Garcia, Jonah Heim, and Josh Sborz as members of the Texas Rangers. But some of the other moves, mainly the Jacob Webb cutting, just really caught me off guard. The Rangers non-tendered Adolis Garcia, Jonah Heim, Jacob Webb, and Josh Sborz on Friday right at the deadline after apparently since the trade deadline trying to trade off Adolis Garcia. And this is frustrating, not only for the fact that this is a sign that the Rangers are probably going to just completely gut the payroll, not Razian level, not Pittsburgh Pirates level, but this is going to get ugly, and this may not be the last cost cutting moves, but mainly because the guys who helped the Rangers get to the World Series, their first ever and only franchise World Series title, are gone. 3 guys that really played integral parts in that. Jonah Heim was such a stalwart back there, controlling the pitching game, controlling the running game, occasionally providing some offense, being an all-star, a Gold Glover in that season. Josh Sborz throwing the final pitch to win the first ever championship in Texas Rangers franchise history. And the guy that he threw it to, both those guys being gone on the same day that the Rangers also lose ALCS MVP, World Series walk-off home run hitting Adolis Garcia. All of those guys gone on the same day is just a huge blow to the heartstrings. I talked a little bit about it on Friday's show, but it just bears repeating that these guys meant something to all of us Rangers fans. And unless you just hopped on the Rangers bandwagon in 2024, then maybe these guys didn't mean as much to you. If you are that kind of a person and you just hopped on for the bad years, then I have a lot of respect for your commitment to the fandom, because these last 2 years have not been fun, but that World Series run was just something so incredibly special. And I think a big problem with sports and sports fandom right now is the GMification of every single sports fan. The casual fan is being phased out. And I know I'm part of the problem of having a show every single day that talks more analytically, more, detached emotionally about baseball. I try and still give it some heart. And I was trying to remind myself every single episode at the very end to say, hey, don't forget to enjoy baseball. That's a message to myself mostly, and also those who are listening as well. But I think the GMification of every fan, you grow up wanting to be a player. And then at a certain point, you think, I'm 5'9", and my parents are not, renowned athletes. They do not have super athletic genes. And unless I have the strongest work ethic of anybody ever, and some things really start to break my way, I'm probably not making it to the big leagues. But then you start to think, well, I could be a front office person. Maybe I could be a scout. Maybe I could, control a team that way. And so people's mindsets, myself included, can sometimes focus more towards the GM kind of a view of a baseball team, of caring more about, how these salaries match up, and what kind of a trade should they make, and this, that, and the other. And just the casual, that boy nice baseball sports watcher has been, left behind a little bit in some senses. But for the game to exist, we need the occasional that boy nice watcher, of a guy who watches Adolis Garcia, and when he hits those monster home runs, he's not thinking about his WAR, he's not thinking about his ex BABIP, he's not thinking about his WOBA, ex WOBA, Z whatever stat that has been invented to kind of try and explain the game away and make it more, numbers focused. You don't need numbers to watch that Adolis Garcia walk-off home run and say, oh, that guy's awesome. Having that guy on my team would be freaking sweet. Watching Josh Sborz go nuclear for a month, having the best month of his freaking life in relief after a full season of complete ups and downs in 2023. Heck, a career of so many ups and downs, and mostly downs, mostly injuries and ineffectiveness for Josh Sborz. But for 1 month, he was absolutely untouchable. Same for Jose Leclerc. Same for 1 year of Jonah Heim being absolutely freaking awesome. Same for 1 year of Leody Taveras being absolutely freaking awesome. Same for 1 year of Travis Jankowski being absolutely freaking awesome. All of those guys coming together to have incredible seasons all at the right time just reminds you of how much of a crapshoot baseball is, and how special it is to have those kinds of runs from guys that, maybe aren't generational talents. Maybe Adolis Garcia, it was never going to be a generational talent, but this is a multi-time all-star. This is a guy who was fun. This is a guy who brought life and joy and excitement and exuberance to a team that was mostly filled with some baseball robots. Some effective, well-programmed baseball robots, but baseball robots nonetheless. Adolis Garcia brought that soul and life and spark and fire and joy and FU attitude that the Rangers needed to get over the Houston Astros in the ALCS. If not for Adolis Garcia, and not only what he did on the field, which was absolutely incredible, one of the greatest postseason runs any player will ever have in the history of sport. That is what we watched Adolis Garcia do in 2023. And even though he has not been that kind of a player for the last 2 seasons, even though he was awful in 2024, both offensively and defensively, and this year, offensively was not good. Defensively had a resurgence, but still offensively was not what the Rangers needed him to be. It still does not take away from what he brought this team for the many seasons that he has been here, for the many all-star seasons that he's had, for that, truly exceptional 2023 season, and just put it all together. And nothing will take that away from Adolis Garcia, but it will take something away from this Texas Rangers squad, because he is not here anymore. Now, what do the Rangers do? What is this a sign of? This is the Rangers saving a decent chunk of money, but I don't want myself, and I don't want others who love the sport to lose that love of these individual players, because the players are what makes the game. It's not the rich guys at the top who keep on making money. Whenever a guy gets cut, a guy who meant a lot to the franchise, I hope that people's reactions isn't just, oh, cool, my ownership group saved $10 million or whatever. It's, wow, that guy's not going to be on my team anymore. I don't get to watch that guy go hard in the paint for my team and have some of those awesome moments anymore. That sucks. That sucks that we don't have that guy to go watch and experience joy when Adolis Garcia is out there, bat flipping and just absolutely obliterating home runs, or making some of these diving catches, or nailing a guy at home plate when it looked like there was no way that anybody with a normal human arm out there in right field could nail a runner running home from second base. But Adolis Garcia could, and he did frequently. And it was fun, and it was joyful, it was exciting, and it sucks that we are not going to get to see that again. But now that these guys are no longer members of the Texas Rangers, what does it mean? Could the Rangers have handled this a little bit differently? I think they could have and should have. What about how they could have, and more right after this. This show is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or you want to ride a hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks, got all kinds of different odds on all kinds of different things. Let's look at some of these World Series championship odds right now. The Los Angeles Dodgers favorite at plus 360, a little bit worse than what they were last week. When I looked last, they were at plus 350. Now they're at plus 360. Yankees at plus 700. Phillies third favorites at plus 1,000. Seattle Mariners tied with the New York Mets at plus 1,100 for the fourth best odds to win the 2026 World Series. So right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Shout out to everydayers making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day. On tomorrow's show, I'll be back and talking a little bit more in depth about Alejandro Ozuna, whether he's ready to be an everyday right fielder or whether the Rangers need to go get some help. And, we'll look into a little bit of that. But the Rangers, this is a surefire sign that the payroll is going to come down. If you've been reading anything that Evan Grant of the Dallas Morning News has been writing this offseason, it has been all tailored and geared towards saying the Rangers are going to cut a lot of money this offseason. How much we'll end up seeing, but it seems like it could be some pretty austere payroll cuts. And same with the folks at DLS that cover the Rangers, same with MLB.com. Kennedy Landry has been saying all of that. All the people who are credentialed and plugged in and who know what's going on have been saying that. And this is a pretty clear indicator of that. And I think the thing that's most frustrating to me about Adolis Garcia just straight up being DFA'd is that there was a player about his age, about his value, making about his money that just got traded for a pretty significant return. Now, maybe it's just a unique situation and the Baltimore Orioles were just super obsessed with having another random indistinguishable white guy in the outfield in their lineup in Taylor Ward, and they were just ready to get rid of Grayson Rodriguez. But Taylor Ward is about the same age as Adolis Garcia, 1 year younger. He plays the same position, a corner outfield, mostly left field as opposed to Adolis Garcia playing right field. Offensively, he's been a better player than Adolis for the last couple of years, but Adolis's 2023 season completely blows out of the water anything that we have seen from Taylor Ward. The defensive value that Adolis Garcia brings is also significantly better. They both had a 2.7 baseball reference WAR. Adolis was projected to make about $1 million more in arbitration, but a very similar type of a player. And the Angels traded him away to the Orioles for Grayson Rodriguez, a young, previously very high upside starting pitcher who's got 4 seasons of control left, did just miss the entirety of this season with some injuries, but that is a very good trade, a very good return for a 2.7 baseball reference WAR player of basically the same age, position, and monetary value in terms of their contract. That it seems like the fact that the Rangers were screaming so loudly to the heavens of, hey, everybody, we're so poor. We're so poor. We got to remind you that we're poor. We definitely can't afford to keep Adolis Garcia. And by screaming that to the world, all the other 29 organizations in Major League Baseball thought, okay, well, why are you calling us trying to trade him? If you're so poor and you're just going to cut him anyway, why would we give up a prospect? Why would we give up a young player? Why would we give up any asset to go get Adolis Garcia and then pay him the $12 million, where it seems like you're pretty clearly screaming, hey, we're just going to cut bait with this guy. So also, could someone give us a prospect for him? But we're also just going to cut bait with him. If they had been less vocal in screaming to the high heavens that they are the brokest boys to ever live, which they're not. I've talked about that ad nauseum this offseason, that they are very much not a poverty franchise that can't afford $12 million on an everyday player. They can. They very much can. And that's also not that expensive for an outfielder. I mean, there are a lot more outfielders making more money than Adolis Garcia would be next season if he just signed for $12 million. These are some of the outfielders that are making more money than Adolis Garcia next year. Teoscar Hernandez, about $12 million. That's comparable. That is a comparable player. Also, Tommy Edman, $12.25 million. Jorge Soler, making more than that, $13 million. He also doesn't even play the outfield. Lourdes Gurriel Jr., making $13 million. Jurickson Profar, $15 million. Anthony Santander, $16.5 million. Same as Tyler O'Neill and Andrew Benintendi. All those guys significantly worse than Adolis Garcia, all of them making 25% more Masataka Yoshida making $18 million. He's significantly worse than Adolis Garcia. Luis Robert Jr. is going to make $20 million next year. Same as Nick Castellanos. Both of them significantly worse players than Adolis Garcia. Do you see where I'm going with this? This is not a completely... Also, Chris Bryant is making $26 million next year to play or not play for the Colorado Rockies. Do you see how $12 million is not that completely unreasonable to ask for a guy who is not an all-star anymore, is not the ALCS MVP version of Adolis Garcia. He's not the 2023 postseason Adolis Garcia, but he is still a valuable player who adds value to your team. And $12 million is not some crazy overage expenditure that the Rangers couldn't possibly afford. They can afford it. They just did not want to. And all of these signs are pointing towards the Rangers not spending this offseason. They've got some things that they need to address in the offense, which was awful last year, and looks like it's going to get somehow even worse, because if you take out Adolis Garcia, and overall his OPS was not particularly effective, but the guy was great at driving in runs. He was great at hitting home runs. He still, even in his worst career year last year, in 135 games, he had 19 bombs and 75 RBIs. That's not horrible. That's not bottom 10 in offensive overall player, like I have heard him being described other places. That is not who Adolis Garcia is. Do not let people tell you that's who Adolis Garcia is. He's not the 2023 version of himself, but he's not this bottom-feeding garbage player. He is not anywhere near the offensive, black hole that Jonah Heim truly was this season. He had been horrible offensively for the last 2 seasons. And so that one makes more sense. It makes more financial sense for the Rangers to say, okay, $6 million on a catcher whose defensive value is not elite and offensive value is non-existent. That makes more sense. That you can kind of stomach a little bit more easily, but also the Rangers will have to go sign a backup catcher, and those can cost anywhere between $5 to $10 million, depending on the backup catcher that you're wanting to go get. So again, they might not even be saving money there overall. They might be getting better in general by getting a better backup catcher, because it seems pretty clear cut that Kyle Higashioka is going to be the primary catcher next season. But still, there's nobody else on this roster really that's going to come anywhere close to the approximation of what they're doing. And not to mention just the sheer fact that so many of these guys from the World Series are gone. This is a completely different team than the one that rolled into that 2023 World Series. Look at the guys that were on that roster for the World Series. The Rangers have 2 pitchers still on their roster. 2 of the 13 that went into there. And one of them is not going to pitch at all this year. It's Cody Bradford. The other one is Nathan Eovaldi. Aroldis Chapman, gone. Dane Dunning, gone. John Gray, gone. Andrew Heaney, Leclerc, Montgomery, Perez, Sborz, Scherzer, Smith, Stratton. All of them gone. And it's not like the Rangers have that many more position players that are still there. I mean, the starting lineup, you had Evan Carter. He's still here. Josh Young's still here. Nathaniel Lowe is gone. Marcus Semien is still here. Josh Smith was on the roster. Corey Seager is still here. But other than that, I mean, Adolis is gone. Garver's gone. Robbie Grossman's gone. Hedges is gone. Heim is gone. Jankowski is out of playing Major League Baseball. He's back with the organization as a first base coach. But, I mean, Leody Taveras is also gone. I mean, more than a third of the starting lineup of that, actually, I think it's about more than half now at this point, of the starting lineup of Game 1 of the World Series is out the door. They're gonzo. That is kind of terrifying, that how much things can change. Now, part of that has changed for the better. The Rangers took some swings on some of these free agent players like Jock Peterson, like Jake Berger. I mean, or not Berger, but Kyle Higashioka. But it kind of worked out with Higgy more towards the second half. And the first half was also really rough, but it did not work out with Jock Peterson, who seemed like such a safe bet to improve this team. But the Rangers have not spent a whole lot the last couple of off seasons. They had their big spending spree in 2021, which, again, that was a big spending spree of spending $500 million on a middle infield, but that was to get the Rangers payroll back anywhere near the range that it should have already been. Before that year, the Rangers were bottom 10 in payroll. Excuse me, they were 20th. So they were 11th, the 11th lowest payroll in the entirety of Major League Baseball as a major market. This is not some tiny run-of-the-mill market. This is a team that can afford to spend, but they're probably not going to. I mean, Phil Maton has already left the Rangers. He has already gone and signed a 2-year with a third option for a third-year deal with the Cubs. That was one of the Rangers' top priorities was bringing back Phil Maton. He was mostly really good this season. He was mostly really good for the Rangers this season, and the Rangers wanted him back, and Phil Maton wanted to be back. But the Rangers have already lost out on him. We don't know exactly what the price point was for Phil Maton signing. Eventually, we will find that out. It probably was projected to be around $7 million. And for a guy who's not going to be your closer, that's maybe more than the Rangers could afford, even though they wanted to bring him back. And Raisel Iglesias, who was pretty terrible in the first half last year, but down the stretch was pretty excellent with the Braves. He signed a 1-year, $16 million deal. And that is maybe the fourth or fifth best closer on the market. Signed a $16 million deal. I think it was $16.5 million for 1 year. The Rangers are not going and spending that level on one reliever. Heck, they may not spend $16 million on the entirety of this bullpen. And this is a sign that things are not looking good for the Rangers and what they're going to do this offseason. And the biggest indicator of that is what they did with Jacob Webb. Talk about that and more right after this. The show is brought to you by Gametime. The NFL season is back, and honestly, there's nothing better than being in the stadium, surrounded by fans cheering on your team. But let's be honest, getting tickets can be a hassle. Between queues, login screens, and prices jumping at checkout, it's frustrating. That's why I use Gametime. It's the app that gives the advantage back to fans. Gametime is fast, it's easy, and is backed by the Gametime guarantee. You always get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time and at the best price. Plus, all fees are included, so the price you see is the price you pay. Gametime has been the best way I've found to get tickets to any kind of event I'm looking to go to, whether it's a concert. I just went to a concert a couple weeks ago. Gametime was the best way to get tickets to that. I've went to several baseball games this year. Want to go check out a Mavs game or a Stars game this offseason? Gametime is the way to get those tickets. It is the most painless, most enjoyable experience I've ever had trying to get tickets. So download the Gametime app today, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Gametime today. Shout out to everybody who's been locked on Rangers, your first listen every single day. On Wednesday's show, I'll be back and I'll be talking a little bit about how this Adolis Garcia exit will end up putting a lot more pressure on Evan Carter. That'll be on Wednesday's episode of Locked On Rangers. I'm leaving town on early on Tuesday morning, so I'm really hoping that no news breaks during the week because I will be in Georgia with my fiance and her family celebrating Thanksgiving, and I probably will not be able to record, so I'm not thinking anything big is coming down the pipe this week. That news about Adolis Garcia and Jonah Heim, and now unexpectedly Jacob Webb, I'm thinking that's the only news we're going to have for some time. Winter meetings are not happening until after I get back, so hopefully we won't have any big catastrophic news or good news happening while I'm away. If so, we'll figure out what's happening there. But the move that shocked me the most, it did not completely shock me that the Rangers just straight up DFA'd Adolis Garcia. It frustrated me. I still think it's not the right move. I still don't think it's the best allocation of resources. I don't think the Rangers are going to backfill that with any kind of talent that is even comparable to what Adolis Garcia did last year. And that is really saying something because Adolis Garcia did not produce anywhere near what the Rangers were expecting last year. But the one that really made me turn my head and say, oh, this is going to get ugly this offseason. This is going to get, massive pay cuts. Are the Rangers going to sign any free agents to multi-year deals? I'm leaning towards no. If the Rangers said, you know what, Jacob Webb, $2 million is too much for a pretty decent reliever. Not the best reliever in baseball, but the league minimum any player can make is $800,000. If you're making $2 million, that is $1.2 million over the league minimum, over the very cheapest you could possibly pay anybody. And $2 million for a pretty fine to solid reliever is more than fine. It is more than reasonable. It is actually a pretty decent deal if you sign a reliever to $2 million and he ends up being fine. Now, Jacob Webb is not going to be the Rangers closer next year. He is not going to be their setup man. He would not have been their seventh inning guy, maybe even that. But for a guy with a 3.0 ERA in 55 games, 66 innings, I mean, about a strikeout, a little bit less than a strikeout per inning. But you look at what he did in the second half. I mean, the second half, he was truly awesome. I mean, 16 games in that second half, a little bit over 22 innings, more than a strikeout per inning, and a 1.59 ERA. A 1.59 ERA in half a season. Look at his baseball savant page, and pretty much everything is towards the red. The only thing in the blue is he wasn't great at getting a ground ball rate. He didn't have very good fastball velocity at 93.5 miles per hour. It's in the bottom third of baseball, but he was still found a way to be very effective. The average exit velocity in the top 5% of baseball. The chase and whiff rate, both those in the top 1/3 of baseball. Barrel rate, hard hit rate, walk rate, all of those. The top 1/3 of baseball with the barrel rate and hard hit rate and expected batting average, expected ERA, all those in the top 20% of baseball. That is a good reliever. Now, I don't know if those numbers would necessarily repeat next year, but especially when you have a really high chase rate and a really high whiff rate, the strikeout rate being a little bit lower makes you think, there's a little bit of luck that could have gone the other way with some of those strikeouts. And this is a guy who provided you 66 innings of a 3.0 ERA. He was significantly better than league average, a 1.22 ERA plus. His ERA was 22% better than league average. And $2 million was too much for the Rangers to stomach for Jacob Webb. That is alarming. That is surprising. That is upsetting. Now, I think the Rangers could go and rebuild and get, it's not me saying that Jacob Webb is the greatest reliever ever and that the Rangers made a horrible mistake by not bringing him back. That's not what I'm saying at all. But if a guy that's fine, that's reasonably cost efficient, that's, putting up decent numbers with you, you can bring him back for $2 million, just not that much over the league minimum, the very absolute bottom tier minimum you could pay any player. Saving $1.2 million to lose a decent reliever is a sign that this team is really looking to massively gut the payroll. And it's why I don't think that these are the only cost-cutting moves that the Rangers are going to make. Now, Josh Sborz move, he's also not saving all that much money. Projected to make about $1.1 million after arbitration this year. It's about what he made this year. It's like $300K more than the league minimum. With Sborz, he missed the entirety of this season after having shoulder surgery after the 2024 season, where he also didn't pitch all that much that year. Really could not find his velocity. And that's more about opening up a 40-man roster spot for Josh Sborz. I get that you're not saving that much money. He'll be probably re-signed to some kind of a minor league deal, maybe with a major league invite to camp. But when he was topping out around 93, I don't think he even hit 95 last year. It was averaging around 91 miles an hour with his four-seam fastball, as opposed to the 96, 97 that he was averaging when he was at his peak in 2023. It's more understandable that the Rangers would just go ahead and say, hey, yeah, we're going to go ahead and not do this anymore. But just the amount of cost cutting and penny pinching to this degree makes me think, how could this be the last move? If they're going to cut, $1.2 million on a reliever here, why wouldn't they go and shop, the likes of Marcus Semien or Corey Seager in a deal where the Rangers would not get any value back? The reason I don't think they trade Corey Seager is because Chris Young is smarter than that. Chris Young knows this fan base. He knows the city. He grew up here. He grew up and played a lot of time as a member of the Texas Rangers. And he can very easily tell his billionaire owner, hey, you see what's happening with Mavs fans with the Luka trade? Do you see how pissed they got? Do you see how they are still only just now after Nico was fired because they would not shut up about how much they hated Nico for trading away Luka Doncic for pennies to basically just save the billionaire owner's money, and because Nico had whatever other reasons that did not make sense and will never make sense. But if you trade away Corey Seager, who brought this team its first ever championship, less than 3 years after he did that, and while he is still very, very good, and he is making a lot of money, so when guys are making a lot of money, no matter how good they are, you're almost never going to get the same kind of value that you should get for a player of that caliber in a trade. It would mostly be a cost-cutting deal. The same with if the Rangers traded away Jacob deGrom. Even though Jacob deGrom was healthy last year, he finished 8th in Cy Young voting. I think he's going to be back to being basically just Jacob deGrom next year. but you're not going to get any kind of the value that you should get for a guy of that caliber because he's making so much money. And teams are like, well, part of us assuming this risk is taking on all this money. So why would we give you a whole bunch of prospects to take on all this money? The benefit you get is by not having to spend this money, which is not a benefit to a team building at all, unless you are an owner and it is your pocketbook that the checks are coming out of. Unless you are Ray Davis or one of the others Rangers minority owners, then that should not affect you. You should not be caring this much about how expensive certain players are. But that's where we are, because these owners have convinced us that, oh yeah, we need to care about how much a certain player is making and raise a big stink if that guy stinks. It should not be tied to as much. I feel like a lot of times we get too caught up with, oh, this player is making this amount of money and they're not great, so we should run them out of town. Or it should just be, oh, this player is not playing great. Who cares how much money he's making? Bench him for someone who is better. I feel like a lot of that has also gotten caught up in the GMification of being a sports fan, of just, oh, I've got to think about this on a budget standpoint, as opposed to, oh, let me just care about actually how my team is doing and focus my energy that way. It is just a very frustrating sign that is pointing to the Rangers just cutting costs in major ways. Before these moves, I thought there's no way in heck they trade Corey Seager. Now, I still think there's maybe a 1 to 3% chance that they actually do it. I think there's maybe more of a likelihood that they trade Jacob deGrom, but Jacob deGrom has a full no trade clause, whereas Corey Seager only has a partial no trade clause. So that also throws a wrench into how difficult it would be to trade away one or both of those players. It is just not a fun situation. And at the end of the day, we're not going to get to see Adolis Garcia in a Rangers uniform anymore. And that, above all else, really just bums me out. That's going to do it for today's show. Thank y'all so much for listening and subscribing. And until next time, don't forget to enjoy baseball.